Because North Korea never discloses its defense policies, military strategy, or nuclear doctrine, we can only guess what its nuclear strategy looks like based on what it announces publicly and on the weapons it actually has. The most trustworthy source for understanding North Korea's nuclear strategy is its own nuclear law. In that law, North Korea says the purpose of its nuclear force is territorial completion. To achieve this, it spells out two missions. The first mission is to block the United States from retaliating with nuclear weapons on behalf of South Korea. In other words, to neutralize America's nuclear umbrella. The second mission is to attack and absorb South Korea. So it's logical to assume that North Korea's nuclear strategy has been shaped around accomplishing these two missions. For the first mission, stopping a U.S. nuclear retaliation, North Korea appears to be using what nuclear theorists call a minimal deterrence strategy. This is the same concept Britain and France used during the Cold War. You only need the ability to destroy a few major enemy cities to scare even a nuclear superpower into backing off. The idea is that while the Soviet Union wouldn't gain much from wiping out Britain or France, it would suffer unacceptable damage if Moscow itself were destroyed, so it would avoid starting a nuclear war with them. Under this concept, the UK and France maintain only 4 nuclear-armed submarines each, and they still consider that enough for deterrence. North Korea seems to be trying to follow a similar model, though in a more varied and aggressive way. It pushed nuclear weapons and missile development simultaneously. After testing a hydrogen bomb in September 2017, North Korea tested an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, that November. When that test succeeded, Kim Jong-un declared in his 2018 New Year's speech that he had a nuclear button on his desk that could strike the U.S. mainland. North Korea has also developed submarine-launched ballistic missiles and is now building nuclear-powered submarines, which would give it a more reliable second strike capability against the U.S. In short, North Korea is building a minimal deterrent like Britain and France, but with more diverse and potentially more powerful methods. Unlike Britain and France, which rely almost entirely on submarines, North Korea, because of technological limits, first built its deterrent around ICBMs and is only now working toward a full nuclear-armed submarine force. If it completes this, it could become even more dangerous than the UK or France in terms of strategic nuclear capability. North Korea's actual weapons show how this strategy is taking shape. It already fields the Hwasong 15, 17, 18, and 19 ICBMs. It has developed the Pukguksong 3, 4, and 5 SLBMs, and in early 2025, it publicly revealed photos showing progress on a nuclear-powered submarine. Once that submarine becomes operational and carries SLBMs, North Korea will effectively have SSBNs capable of crossing the Pacific and launching surprise strikes against American coastal cities. North Korea's nuclear strategy will be complete once it acquires roughly 3 SSBNs. But because North Korea is far weaker than Britain or France in every other way, it uses a much more aggressive version of minimal deterrence. I have called this North Korea's brinkmanship deterrence strategy. It's like two people hanging off the same rope on the edge of a cliff. One threatens to cut the rope so both will fall unless the other backs down. North Korea acts this way because it has almost nothing to lose, while the US has a great deal to lose. This gives North Korea a strategic advantage and makes it hard for the U.S. to respond. From North Korea's point of view, once the first mission is achieved, neutralizing the U.S. nuclear umbrella, its second mission automatically becomes achievable because South Korea has no nuclear weapons. The political scientist Hans Morgenthau once wrote that when a nuclear state attacks a non-nuclear state, the non-nuclear state has only 2 choices: surrender or be destroyed. In other words, a war between a nuclear state and a non-nuclear state can only end one way. The non-nuclear side loses. This is why North Korea's nuclear strategy toward the South is essentially a nuclear war fighting strategy. South Korea is not treated as something to deter, but something to attack. South Korea has a larger population, a stronger economy, and a capable military supported by U.S. forces. But if North Korea used nuclear weapons, the South, lacking its own nuclear arsenal, would likely be forced to surrender. So if North Korea believes the first mission is partly achieved, that the U.S. nuclear umbrella might not be activated, it may conclude that it can use nuclear weapons to conquer the South and achieve its territorial completion. In fact, after North Korea succeeded in developing operational nuclear weapons in early 2013, it created its 7-day war plan, which is still being refined today. The core idea is to conquer South Korea within 7 days by using nuclear weapons. And starting in late 2023, Kim Jong-un openly declared at party and parliamentary meetings that he was willing to use nuclear weapons to attack and subjugate South Korea. The problem in the US and other Western countries is that they remain focused on denuclearizing North Korea, and therefore avoid seriously studying or preparing for North Korea's offensive nuclear strategy. Even though most experts and policymakers now admit that North Korea will not give up its nuclear weapons, they still pay too little attention to North Korea's actual nuclear strategy and how to counter it. As a result, North Korea's offensive nuclear strategy could become even more effective simply because the US and South Korea are not preparing for it adequately. For more analysis on this topic, see the Chapter 2 of the author's book, Nuclear North Korea: Armed, Desperate, and Unpredictable. If you'd like to hear more related content, please click the subscribe button.